Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's webinar, Is Manufactured Housing in Your Future? Hosted by the Rural and Native American Initiative team here at Enterprise. My name is Adrienne Norwood, and I work under this initiative as the Communications Policy Program Associate, and I will be your host. I will go over just a few quick logistics, and we will begin the presentation. For those of you who are streaming audio through your laptop, if you get disconnected, you can switch to the phone line. To get the dial-in numbers, just click on the Switch Audio button, the red circle on the left above the red button on the bottom of your screen. Once this menu opens, just click Audio Connection and switch to audio. Follow the prompts and you should be able to dial in. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out to all participants within the next couple of weeks. There will be time at the end of the presentation for Q&A, so just to note that all participants have been muted upon entry, but you can ask questions throughout the presentation in the Q&A box and direct your questions to all panelists. You can also send your questions directly to the chat box. Now, I will turn it over to Russell Caney, Program Director for the initiative, who will introduce our webinar presenter for today.
Thank you, Adrienne. Good afternoon or morning, everyone, wherever you happen to be on this Tuesday. I'm Russell Caney, Director of Programs for the Rural and Native American Initiative at Enterprise Community Partners. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled, Is Manufactured Housing in Your Future? Our guest and speaker today is Kate Davidoff, the Director of Affordable Homeownership at Prosperity Now. Kate focuses on programs, legislative advocacy, and policy to connect Americans to affordable homeownership opportunities. Kate has been working in housing and community development for over 10 years in a variety of nonprofit and governmental roles. Prior to Prosperity Now, Kate worked at Pew Charitable Trust, where she analyzed and researched city responses to fiscal distress, how city and state governments collaborate on tax incentives, and how states use data to improve decision and policy making. Kate holds degrees from a Bachelor of Science degree from Cornell University, a Master's of Urban Planning from the University of Michigan, and a doctorate PhD in Urban Planning and Public Policy from Rutgers University. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I haven't heard my bio read in a little while. Thank you so much for having us participate on this webinar. As Russell and Adrienne noted, I'm going to be giving a presentation, but I know it's tough on webinars to do sort of an interactive question and answer, but I really would like to make this something that's useful for all of the participants. So please feel free to type in your questions as we're going along. I'd love to make this more of a discussion and also have this be a discussion ongoing. This is an area of work that at Prosperity Now we are really sort of undertaking relatively recently, and we plan to keep working on these issues. So I'm really seeing today as a learning opportunity for both hopefully you all to learn a little bit about what we do, but for you to inform us to make sure that our work going forward really includes the views of those that we are speaking about. So with that, I will get started. So as Russell mentioned, let me just make sure I can. Okay. As Russell mentioned, I am the Director of Affordable Homeownership at Prosperity Now. Prosperity Now is a Washington, D.C. based national nonprofit, and we work with local organizations across the country on asset and wealth building initiatives and tools. So we work on anything from children's savings accounts to retirement savings, and we have a small affordable homeownership team where we work with local organizations, state and federal policy, and all sorts of advocates in the field who are seeking to create more opportunities for low and moderate income families to live in stable communities. So what do we do on the affordable homeownership team? I'm just going to briefly talk about this because we think about homeownership and housing sort of in these buckets of preparing low and moderate income families for homeownership. So that's anything from helping people who need some more financial capability tools, homebuyer education, any kind of things where we think we can help support people with savings for down payment, getting people ready for homeownership, but also just for kind of having more stable housing, even if homeownership isn't in the cards. We work to expand the supply of affordable homes. So that is something where our manufactured housing work comes into play. We also work on a host of issues around reducing regulatory barriers to build affordable homes and other types of financing, making financing accessible for low and moderate income folks, because we know that while we need to build more housing, some of the issues around affordable housing actually have to do with access to finance, not just the amount of affordable homes available. And then finally, we work to reduce the risk of homeownership. So as we learned in the foreclosure crisis and in experiences since then as well, homeownership can be a risk, and in some cases made riskier by faulty loan products and just kind of an overall reduced savings once people purchase homes. So we work on issues around reducing the risk of homeownership by promoting savings and also promoting protections for those that have purchased a home. So this presentation will really focus on manufactured housing. So I want to talk a little bit more detail about manufactured housing. This is a point in the presentation where I would normally ask everyone to raise their hand and tell me whether they see manufactured housing as a liability in their community or an asset in their community. So spoiler, most people raise their hand and say it's a liability in their community and see it really as the first photo in the slide. And so one of the things that we really try to do is think about manufactured housing as an asset for our communities. So as I mentioned, Prosperity Now is an asset and wealth building organization, and we see the opportunity for manufactured housing to be an asset building tool. While we know that there are some significant challenges around manufactured housing, and particularly in Native communities and in Indian country, but we do think with protections and with the right type of housing, it really can be an asset for wealth creation. So manufactured housing is about less than half the average cost per square foot of a site-built home. So it's generally more affordable for residents, but it's not always the case, and particularly if you don't own the land beneath the home. So this is an area that comes up when we talk about manufactured housing a lot, and I'm going to talk about it several times throughout this presentation. But really, some manufactured housing residents, and fee simple is really the term that is used when we talk about this, operate much like site-built homes where you can access a mortgage. You own the home, you own the land beneath the home, you're able to obtain traditional financing, which comes with consumer protections, which comes with standardized mortgage rates, and a host of benefits. But for residents who live in manufactured home communities or more mobile home parks, they own the home but not the land beneath. So this creates a quasi-ownership structure and leaves homeowners with fewer financing options, less protections, and a decreased chance to build value. You're often paying for the loan in your home, plus the lot rent, which can increase often without warning. So Just, and then on native lands and in Indian country, this is complicated even further by land use differences in those communities. So this is an area that really is a challenge for creating asset and wealth building opportunities for manufactured homeowners. Another thing that we talk a lot about is the energy efficiency and high quality homes are out there. And, especially new homes, they really become very energy efficient. Challenges really come around existing homes, and particularly homes that were built before the HUD code. So if you're in the manufactured housing space, you will hear people talking about HUD code. And now those are a series of regulations and codes that HUD passed in 1976 and then again in the 1990s. And so if homes were built prior to 1976, you'll hear shorthand pre-HUD code homes. Those are often the more difficult homes in terms of energy efficiency, needing repairs, really challenging when it comes to resale value because they're just really not up they're just not up to the code. And then finally, just the cash sales are important, again, for existing homes. A lot of homes are purchased through cash, and we're going to talk a little bit more about financing as we get going further on to the presentation. So there are some particular considerations for Native communities around manufactured housing. So manufactured housing is a widely used form of affordable housing in Indian country and Native communities. Our friends at the Center for Indian Country Development, I think some of them have registered for this webinar, which is hosted at the Minneapolis Federal Reserve. They've done a lot of great research on financing and manufactured housing in Indian country. So they've noted that about 17% of reservation households currently reside in manufactured homes, which is on par with the rate of rural America. But close to half of American Indians who borrowed to buy a home on reservation land secure their loan with a manufactured home, and that data is from 2016. So it might have changed a little bit, but I'm guessing not too much. So the difference again between titling and financing the manufactured home as fee simple, which is real estate, which again you're sort of able to get a traditional mortgage as opposed to financing a home where you don't own the land, is particularly important in Indian country, and this really comes around to the additional steps you need to pledge your trust land lease as security for mortgages, and just generally higher costs of the loan. So you'll also hear when people are talking about manufactured housing finance a term chattel lending. So really that's the way that homes that are not titled as real estate are secured. So it's a chattel loan. It's seen as personal property. Again, you're not necessarily going to get as many protections, and you're actually likely to get a higher interest rate for those loans. So these are some of the particular challenges. The stigma of manufactured housing is pretty strong across the field, but it is also still an issue in Native communities as well. It's not always seen as the best investment. It's not always seen as a high quality for families, and so that's something that can be a challenge. Also, the capacity of organizations. So housing organizations in general, as we'll talk about as this presentation goes into more depth on ways to kind of increase information for manufactured home buyers. It's a lot. It's complicated, and it goes even beyond just home buyer counseling, right? So just having the understanding of what manufactured housing looks like, what the financing options are. It's just another layer of information for organizations to really understand. One of the other issues in Native communities is really the concentrated lending market. So, as I mentioned, sort of the lending market in general, since a lot of people are not getting traditional mortgages, the network of lenders is smaller, and so there are fewer lenders that are lending to homeowners in Native communities, and so that just makes fewer options and can make it a little bit more difficult to access traditional financing. Although that is starting to, there's starting to be some adjustments and change in that, and at least awareness around that issue. What are some other considerations for manufactured housing in Native communities? So one thing that we have noticed, and again, thanks to the Center for Indian Country Development for really kind of putting this to the forefront, is denial rates for those that do apply for loans are disproportionately high. So this is a graph from 2017, but it's a higher rate of denial for folks that even are trying to access financing for manufactured housing. And some of the reasons why the rates are high that have been stated are due to credit, due to debt-to-income ratio for homeowners, and due to collateral issues, not being able to have something to put up as collateral. So, overall, denial rates are similar for groups on site-built homes for some of these census tracts. But since the end of the financial crisis, the manufactured home loan denials have gone up, while other sort of groups that use manufactured housing has remained steady. So one of the questions that we're thinking of is sort of why are denial rates for Native communities so high, and what can tribal leaders really do to address some of these? So some of the things that they can do, we talked a little bit about this. I'm not going to go into too much detail about all of these, but just kind of putting it out there. I'd really think about how to facilitate low-cost financing. So some of the low-cost financing are, you can kind of access low-cost financing through HUD programs and USDA programs, other federal loan guarantee programs, but these require, agreements that tribal members then can become eligible for. So really trying to put into place some of those agreements, really kind of understanding, how the financing works on trust land, working with some of the government-sponsored enterprises like Fannie Mae to really think about how to encourage financing through some of the tribes' ordinances and other restrictions from the tribes themselves. And so, there are ways that tribal leaders can work to make some of these financing options more available to manufactured homeowners. The second thing they can really do is think about how to protect manufactured home buyers, and this is really something that we're going to get into in the next slide about homebuyer counseling, because that's sort of the crux of this idea of how do we think about homebuyer counseling specific for manufactured homeowners, and even more tailored to those that are living on Native communities. And then finally, kind of going along the same lines around the financing, but thinking about the tribal lands themselves and facilitating the use of those lands for homeownership. So, why is tailored homebuyer education important? So, there's been a fair number of resources in the last couple of years that have come out around tribal homebuyer counseling. So Enterprise obviously put together a really important resource, which is kind of how we came about working with Enterprise on this. And then the Center for Indian Country Development also put out a great resource about Tribal Leaders Handbook on Homeownership. And that Tribal Leaders Handbook did include a section on manufactured housing. But we don't think that we don't want to reinvent the wheel on homebuyer counseling for Native communities. I think these resources are really great resources. What we would like to really think about, and this is where we really want to get feedback from you all, because we are in the process of thinking about that right now, about how to include manufactured housing for as part of these resources. And so kind of getting back to the slide about, the denials of manufactured homeowners, thinking about how does homebuyer education and financial education really help address the credit and debt to income, which is why some of those homeowners were denied. And so there are a range of elements that we are hoping to include in sort of a curriculum around manufactured housing and first-time home buyers. So some of these things could include ways to help homeowners, work with USDA and HUD to become eligible for some of these programs. Also learning which manufactured home retailers serve the reservation. So retailers are really the link between the purchaser, the person who is, the home buyer who's purchasing the home, and the manufacturer. The retailer is the place where folks can go and receive and pick out their home and figure out which home they would like and what services in the home they would like to include. There are, retailers are responsible for things like warranty claims and other sort of protections in a lot of these cases. And tribal leaders really might be able to help buyers enforce these rights. And so things like this can be included in a homebuyer education curriculum. Also, we could include information about transportation and installation costs. So there's some interesting data that shows while manufactured housing is more affordable, when you add in transportation and installation costs, it does obviously increase the cost of the home. Even though it doesn't quite close the gap, it still wouldn't be the same cost as a site built. But just kind of incorporating that into people's decision making as they're thinking about, what can I afford? Let me think about the transportation and installation costs. Getting back to titling, again, this is sort of from the beginning of the conversation that I was talking about. So is it possible to title the property as real estate? Are there ordinances, are there tribal ordinances that you can kind of use to retitle manufactured housing from personal property to real estate? Again, that's something that could be beneficial to be able to get access to financing, but it's going to require more than just what the homeowner is able to do on their own. Just education, understanding, about the history of the tribe and sort of the meaning of the sovereignty and the significance of trust lands. And also just thinking about, ordinances that might support the HUD code. So, including ordinances for the communities, for the homes to actually meet HUD code standards. So, these homebuyer education pieces are as much for the individual borrower as they are for sort of tribal leaders and participants in, other homebuyer education, because a lot of it is going to be training those that are providing homebuyer education of what sort of the intricacies of manufactured housing on Native lands are, and then how do you effectively inform the home buyer of those, and how do you help facilitate, purchasing and better financing options. But there are a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of opportunities for Native communities. There's a lot of Native CDFIs that are starting to get interested in mortgage lending, and so there's opportunities to starting programs from the ground up. And a lot of CDFIs and local housing organizations have developed close relationships with borrowers. So there really is opportunities for better education and better information around manufactured housing and manufactured housing options for residents. For our work around creating this curriculum or adding a curriculum around manufactured home buying, we are reviewing current resources right now, and like I mentioned, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're looking for feedback, so opportunities like this to get feedback from those that are on the ground. What are you hearing? What do you see about manufactured housing in tribal lands? Is this something that you think is a reasonable and affordable and a wealth building tool for your tribal members? We're putting this out there to get feedback from people to really tell us, whether we're going in a direction that makes sense. And then we're going to be drafting sort of this initial curriculum. We'll be testing it with partners to make sure that what we put out there is useful and helpful. And then we'll be releasing, hopefully releasing a curriculum for interested organizations early in 2020. In the meantime, we're going to be having a plenary at our I'm Home conference, which is our annual manufactured housing conference, which is in just about 7 weeks in Portland, Oregon. We'll be having a session specifically around Native communities and manufactured home ownership in Native communities and on tribal land. So if you haven't signed up already and you're interested, please feel free to sign up, and also let me know if if there's other partners that you think would be interested in participating. It's a conference that includes a wide range of issues around manufactured housing. It's anything from policy, advocacy, organizing, research. We have folks from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac come talk about duty to serve. So we have a whole host of participants that come, and it's just a really great opportunity to learn more about manufactured housing in general. We'll have energy efficiency panels and communication panels, and so we encourage folks to sign up and participate. Another place where you can get more information is through our I'm Home network. And again, this is where we really work with partners on the ground. We're always looking for information about what we can be doing here, what is helpful, are these tools helpful? We provide a fair amount of policy and data tools to our partners. It's free to sign up. This is just a screenshot from our website to sign up to get more information. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we do manufactured housing, but we also have a broader affordable homeownership network. So if you're interested in issues that go beyond manufactured housing, we can talk about that. But we have a very active manufactured housing network, just because we've been in the field for a long time, and we've developed relationships with folks that are interested specifically in manufactured housing, and particularly because of some of the nuances around manufactured housing, I think it's helpful to have this network that primarily focuses on this. So that is going to conclude my formal presentation. I wanted to keep it sort of as short and to the point as possible to open it up for questions from you all, feedback. What would you like to see more of? Do you think that manufactured housing is a viable and affordable and sustainable option for the people that you serve?
Thank you, Kate, for this wonderful presentation. That was a wealth of information. We will now open the floor for questions, but first I want to read out 2 questions that was in the chat box. First question. Kate, is this seminar only applied to Native Americans, or is this kind of shared all over the spectrum?
Yeah. Oh, for the I'm Home conference, I assume that's what the person is talking about. That is for everyone. So it will be talking about manufactured housing generally. We will have one special panel specifically around Native American, and it will be included in sort of other pieces of the conference. But the conference itself is just the whole field of manufactured housing.
Thank you. Second question, is it possible to get a copy or 2 of the Enhancing and Implementing Home Ownership Programs in Native Communities?
Sure, that is not our resource, but I think those resources are all available. I think that's your resource enterprise, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Russell, can she get 2 copies of that? I think it's on our website. Okay. Who was that? I think that was Carla. Carla, I'll reach out to you and send you those materials.
Yeah, the answer, Adrian, is yes, this is Russ Caney. We do have both hard copies of the Tribal Leaders Handbook on Homeownership, and we also have it available online. So if you want to send an email to Adrian, we'd be glad to get you either or of those copies. It is a great resource. We worked with the Center for Indian Country Development, and as Kate mentioned, just a wealth of information there, and they continue with great work across Indian Country and housing issues.
Thank you. Next question. We have a lot of questions. Someone is curious what you all think of the stats that state life expectancy of manufactured homes being short.
Oh, of the homes themselves, the life expectancy of the homes themselves being shorter than site-built homes. I'm guessing that's the question.
Yes, I guess so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the quality of manufactured housing has really changed over time. One of the things that we'll be doing at the I'm Home conference, I forgot to mention, is doing a site visit of the Monday morning of the conference, a site visit of a couple of the new properties in and around the Portland area. And really, I think people would be surprised about the quality of the homes, and in a lot of cases, now the quality is, you really can't tell much of the difference between a site-built and a manufactured housing. I think some of the older units, I think as far as life expectancy, some of these units have long outlived their life expectancy, and the issue is really replacing those units as opposed to the challenge of life expectancy. So the original life expectancy was only supposed to be 15, 20 years, and these are homes from the 1970s. So I think, the quality has really improved. The factory-built housing has really improved. And I think really replacing some of these older units with the newer units is an area of interest, and could be a solid option. But like I said, the energy efficiency and the ability for modifications around, to comply with Americans with Disabilities Act, and really just make these homes livable for a range of abilities is really pretty incredible. And so I think it's going to be a lot about really exposing people to what is out there now and what is available.
All right, thank you. Next question. Do you see manufactured housing being used as an option for rental housing development rather than home ownership in rural areas? If so, are there case studies that you can share?
Yeah, that's a great question about rental. If I can see who, or you can share with me afterwards, Adrian, who asked the question
Yes.
about rental. I am happy
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to get back to the person about rental. We've seen it as far as this isn't really rental, but as far as we've worked on a couple of projects around transitional housing, so working with organizations to provide manufactured housing actually to formerly homeless families. And so that sort of acts as a transitional, and that's really working with the organizations who take a lot of the responsibility for ownership of the units, and then working with the families to help them create a plan to either, eventually be paying for the units, or some of the units have been donated. But as far as case study examples of rental, I will definitely get back to you on that. I do think it's an option. I think the financing is challenging, and I think where the rental ends up coming in is in mobile home parks, right? So a fair number of people that are living in mobile home parks are renting. They are renting both the unit and they are renting the land, and that just really acts as just a traditional renting. More of a traditional renting agreement, because the park owner owns the land and they own the unit, so they operate it just as a traditional rental. So it's definitely the rental piece of it is less of the sort of challenging of the financing, because the person that will own the unit generally would own the land, and then you just rent the unit as though you would rent any other unit. So, but I will get back to you on any sort of good examples of good case studies where it's being used as affordable rental.
Thank you. And Marty, I will give Kate your information. The next question, someone would like for you to explain what a CDFI is.
Oh, sure, yes, a community development financial institution. I apologize. I usually try very hard not to use acronyms, but sometimes they sneak in, so thank you for asking. So community development financial institutions, CDFIs, are generally financial institutions that have smaller footprints, that work with in more community-based lending, and so they will also sometimes offer additional programs beyond just the lending and financing that a traditional bank might offer. So for a lot of Indian country and community and Native communities, CDFIs are sort of the main financing institution that is available to them. And I would encourage folks to look at OISTA, which is sort of a national organization that brings together a lot of native CDFIs. They have a lot of great resources about CDFIs on native communities, and what other resources and programs they provide that go beyond traditional lending and financing opportunities. And so that's OWEESTA, and they have a lot of great resources.
And there's another question regarding CDFIs. I don't know if you answered this already, but the question is, are there any CDFIs currently loaning for manufactured housing?
That is a great question. There are some, but I don't have the list offhand. I believe there are a few, and that both I can also get back to that person on that question. And that is also something that will come up at the I'm Home conference. I know last year we had some folks that talked about that. It's a small number, but definitely can get back to the person on that. And it would be interesting at the I'm Home conference. I think that will come up as well.
Great. I see two more questions. So how does one begin their search for manufactured housing?
That is a great question. So it's going to depend on where you live and what retailers are available. So we have a partner, Next Step, so NEXT, Next Step, which is a national organization, but they work in a variety of states across the country that really helps to identify retailers, and they have a manufactured housing curriculum, first-time homebuyer curriculum. It's not a specific for Native or Indian country, but it's a really great curriculum that they've instituted and through eHome America, so it's actually an online curriculum. So they provide lists of retailers that they work with, and so some of those retailers are ones that we would encourage you to reach out to because they offer they'll offer this homebuyer counseling, and they're retailers that that we trust because they work with a partner of ours, and they provide Energy Star, energy efficient homes. So my first step would be to go to Next Step's website and think about because it's going to be all about the retailers and where the opportunities are to work with retailers to purchase homes.
Thank you. Next question. It's long, so I'm going to take my time.
Okay.
While stigma certainly affects municipal thoughts on zoning and financial opportunities, has anyone considered the stigma often served as the glue which turned parks into communities and gave voice to activism?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think that is something that we've thought about here too. Kind of, so two answers to that question, right? I think one thing that another organization that we work with is ROC USA, ROC USA, and I don't know if it's helpful afterwards. I can kind of put together a list of these resources. And maybe, Adrian, you can send them out when you send out the slides, because I know it's hard to kind of write them all down as I'm talking. But what they do is they work with parks that are up for sale, and they work with the residents to purchase the communities and actually purchase the land. They work with them on financing, and in a lot of cases, the lot rents either don't go up or they only go up minimally, and they really help them figure out a way to purchase the whole community. And they have created, these resident-owned communities where residents who didn't know each other before or might not have thought of themselves as living in a community, they maybe just thought of themselves as living in a mobile home park, and really created amazing organizing and tenant and resident opportunities to I think you mentioned like the glue that holds the community together, and so those opportunities have been really powerful to see where it's possible for residents to actually come together and purchase their park and purchase their communities. The other thing about stigma, we also October is our anti-stigma month, our sort of national, we created, but manufactured housing anti-stigma month. And I think the word stigma is it's an interesting term, and kind of how people identify where they live. And again, like as I mentioned from the beginning, we don't see manufactured housing as a stigma. I think we really see it as a community, just like any other, and people who live in communities, some communities are really proud of where they are, and they've created all sorts of resident opportunities and beautification opportunities, and there are others that don't have that feeling of pride. So I think you're right in a lot of local governments and policymakers can see sort of these communities from a stigma lens, but I think people who live in the communities have a real opportunity to show that that's not how they view themselves, and to come together kind of like any other community and be proud of where they are. So if other people are interested in this idea of stigma and the opposite of stigma, which is pride, I think, and being proud of your community, I encourage you to reach out as we talk about October, sort of our anti-stigma month, and just sort of this area as we move forward.
The next question, I think it's a question or a statement. It says, I would also be interested in hearing the answer to the rental question in transitional housing examples.
Okay, great. So, Adrian, you can just pass that on to me, and I will be happy to share that. And if other people are interested, again, I can just put together. Maybe I can put together a one-pager with some resources and include that in the resource, so you can include that when you send out the recording or the notes for the event.
Okay, and sorry about that. I wanted to unmute the lines, but I think someone has some music in the background. If you have any more questions, can you just type them in the Q&A box? We have 15 more minutes if anyone has any more questions. Kate, any last comments?
Yeah, again, thank you for the questions. They're always helpful for us to hear what questions people have. And if you want to reach out and let me know what you think about my question to you of what do you see as a manufactured housing in your communities? Do you see it as something that is a viable, affordable homeownership opportunity for people that you serve and that you work with, and what is missing? I think this single question is a great question and something to think about as we include homebuyer curriculum around what do we mean when we're talking about manufactured housing, and how do we work with potential home buyers and help them think through what their options are. So please feel free to reach out to me. Please feel free to participate in any of the conference or network or Anti-Stigma Month activities that we have coming up. We definitely want to hear from you.
All right, I don't see any more questions. Let me check the chat box. Nope, I don't see any more questions.
Okay, well, I'm sure everybody will happy to have their 10 minutes back at the end of the hour.
Yes, and if you guys didn't get a chance to ask your question, Kate's information is on the slide, her email address and phone number, so please don't hesitate to reach out to Kate for any more questions. All right, and thank you guys for joining us. Until next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.